Everybody, welcome back to the NC State Insider Podcast. I'm your host and lead beat writer for NC State on SI, Tucker Sennett, here to talk some Wolfpack football. Game week 5. The Wolfpack is set to face the Virginia Tech Hokies in its third ACC matchup of the 2025 season. So I figured it would be good to kind of give you the basics on Virginia Tech, what you've missed with their season up to this point. And to put it simply, you've missed a lot. If you're not familiar with what's been going on with the Hokies program, they entered the game with a 1-3 record, came into the season sort of hoping that things were going to be turning around within this program, led by then head coach Brent Pry. He brought back his quarterback, Kyron Drones, who they've kind of had high hopes for over the last couple of years. And there's always been talk about if he was able to take the next step forward, could this program sort of return to that form that they once had as a proud member of the ACC and a always a difficult opponent, especially on the road. And things started about as poorly as they possibly could have. Virginia Tech played in a sort of sentimental game against South Carolina, coached by Shane Beamer, the son of longtime Virginia Tech coach Frank Beamer. And that was kind of a emotional game for the program. Virginia Tech ended up losing that game and um, collapsing in a big way in the second half. So things didn't work out. And the hope was that this team could turn things around in a matchup against Vanderbilt, another SEC program, and start to show that it was competitive, that it was improved, because the defense at points really did frustrate South Carolina. And the Vanderbilt game was anything but that. They were dominated again in the second half by Vanderbilt offensively. Vanderbilt just ran the ball down their throat, as they do to a lot of teams, because Vanderbilt is a quality opponent. But where the wheels really came off the bus with this Virginia Tech team, um, that came in week 3 in a home game against Old Dominion. Old Dominion went in there and blew out Virginia Tech in the first half of that game and won the game outright. And ultimately, that led to the administration at Virginia Tech coming to the decision that Brent Pry was no longer the right guy for this job, and they relieved him of his duties, and they have decided that they're going to move in a different direction. You're caught up. They beat Wofford last week. The interim head coach is Philip Montgomery, who took over from Pry. He was the offensive coordinator to start the season, and sort of he's brought a very positive outlook, as most interim coaches do, in a pretty impossible situation, which I'll touch on in a minute. But Montgomery has stated that Virginia Tech is 0-0 in ACC play, which is true. That's fact. And his approach is things are going to be week to week for this team because of the record. The rest of the season is just about proving that this team is not the worst in the conference, that it's better than what it's shown so far. The problem for that is the situation with the roster. So when coaches are fired early in the season or at any point, a 30-day portal window opens where players can enter and exit a program freely. And obviously, when Pry was fired, that window immediately opened, and it hasn't hit quite yet. But the expectation is that over the course of this week and the coming weeks, there will be a mass exodus out of this program just to sort of preserve eligibility, to preserve health, and sort of explore other options, because some of these players have put enough on tape that they can start to peruse the transfer portal and find their next destination rather than stick it out with Virginia Tech. The other issue is because they've already played 4 games, we've reached the red shirt cutoff window of 4 games. So these players that are younger, that want to preserve that eligibility, are likely to exercise their red shirts in order to not have this be a lost season. And that's left Montgomery with a situation where he really doesn't know what his roster is going to look like on a week to week basis because so many players might be exiting in the next few days. Really problematic when you're trying to prep for a angry NC State squad coming off an ugly loss to Duke, and you already have significant issues on the defensive side of the football. There's also the issue at the staff. There's uneasiness in an interim staff because you just don't know what the situation's going to be. When they hire a new coach, are you going to be able to stay on with this program, or are you just kind of a lame duck here? And you're coaching out the year basically to put film out there of what you can do as a coach. And Montgomery's approached that really well. In his press conference on Tuesday, he said, there he cares about the families and the extended parts of his staff's lives, and he wants to make sure that they can go out there and at the end of the day still field a football team that can be competitive and that can sort of develop these young student athletes into men. That's really their ultimate goal at this point. But it's going to be really difficult from a talent standpoint, especially given the situation with players leaving throughout the coming days. Major stat that I wanted to point out before we wrap things up here: Virginia Tech is one of the worst run defenses in the nation, which is not good facing an NC State program that's led by sophomore running back Hollywood Smothers, who's off to a phenomenal start to the season, leading the ACC in rushing yards, averaging over 6 yards per carry behind an offensive line that at times hasn't been helpful to him at all. So that's problematic for Virginia Tech. Some of their statistics in the run game, they're averaging 210.7 yards allowed on the ground per game. That's good for 116th in the country. They're averaging 5.6 yards per carry. That's good for 118th in the country. So they've obviously played some really strong running teams, particularly Vanderbilt, that certainly inflated those numbers. But NC State has proven, and Smothers has proven, that it doesn't really matter who's on the other side. He's gonna get his yards. And Montgomery talked about sort of having a bend don't break approach with him, which is really dangerous with a guy like Smothers who, they want to gang tackle and contain to short and medium yardage runs, but the way he breaks tackles, the way he makes defenders miss, he's going to get some explosive yards in this game. And when we talk more about the predictions with Daniel and I later in the week, we'll certainly include Hollywood Smothers in that discussion. So yeah, that's sort of the basics that you might have missed with Virginia Tech in 2025 up to this point. Certainly a unique opponent and one that NC State is sort of on the lookout for because they obviously have that history of losing two coaches, interim coaches in the last year. They lost to Blake Harrell in that 2024 Military Bowl. He had earned the permanent tag and had a very strong tenure as the interim coach to that point, but it's the same situation at the end of the day. It's a guy who's taking over mid-year and trying to really spark this team into being better. So it should be a unique challenge for this NC State team as they look to bounce back from that Duke loss. If you want more NC State football content, feel free to follow our social media accounts. You can follow me at Senate Tucker on X. You can follow the website's social media account at Wolfpack on SI on X. You can get more episodes of the NC State Insider Podcast daily at the Sports Videos on SI YouTube channel. And obviously, you can find all of our stories on our website, NC State on SI. As always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.